Okay, so imagine this. It's the mid-1980s. You're totally fluent in technology.
Right.
You've got a Macintosh at home. You're using Lotus 123, maybe even Excel, and you're, dialing up to transfer files, playing games online. You live in a world where information is digital.
It's fluid. You can search it instantly.
Exactly. Now take that person, that exact person, and drop them into a school system. An institution where the biggest, most life-shaping decisions about kids are being made with stacks of manila folders.
And they're organized alphabetically. The main data tool is just someone's memory.
That gap, that huge disconnect is what we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into some amazing source material from Janet, the founder of EdStar Analytics. Her company's been evaluating federally funded K-12 programs for, over 3 decades now?
Yeah, and what makes her perspective so unique is her career path. She started as a math major, an early tech user, from the early 80s, but then she went straight into teaching middle school math.
And then into a big school systems research department.
Right, before finally founding EdStar.
So for years, she was basically living in 2 different worlds at the same time, worlds that operated on completely different timelines.
On one side, you have her reality, where she can sort and analyze data in seconds. And on the other, you have the school's reality, which was all paper, agonizingly slow, and, just full of potential for huge mistakes.
Our mission today is to really get into the human cost of this data divide. We're looking at how a lack of really basic data skills meant that good people, good educators trying their best, were basically working in the dark.
The information was there. It existed. They just didn't have a way to turn on the light.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's go back to the beginning of her journey, around 1985. Janet's teaching 8th grade math in Champaign, Illinois.
And she's teaching all the tracks, from remedial all the way up to algebra, and she starts noticing something is just fundamentally wrong with how students are placed.
What was she seeing?
She kept seeing these kids who were obviously talented, who got the concepts, but they were stuck in the remedial classes. She just knew they were misplaced.
So she'd move them herself.
She would, but she wanted to know why the system was failing them in the first place.
So she sits in on the placement meeting. The meeting where the 7th grade teachers decide the math tracks for the next year. And this is where the story just delivers a gut punch. What did she see?
It was baffling. The teachers are around a table with this giant stack of paper folders, one for every student, arranged alphabetically. And as they go through them, they are not looking at test scores. They are not looking at grades. They're talking about the students' personal lives.
You're kidding. They're using personal stuff as the main criteria.
The deeply personal stuff. Janet gives us one specific example of a teacher holding up a folder for a kid who's a clear student, top performer.
Okay.
And the teacher says, he's an A student, but his parents are splitting up. He might have a stressful year. Let's put him in remedial math to relieve stress.
Wow. An A student in remedial math. I mean, I get the compassion. They're trying to help.
It's coming from a good place, but it's an academic disaster. You're completely misaligning his ability with the challenge he needs.
And that's just the emotional failure. The source material points out an even bigger structural failure, the alphabetical problem.
Yes. The algebra class, the advanced track, had a hard cap, only 25 seats.
And because they were going through the folders alphabetically.
By the time they worked through the A's, the B's, the C's, and got somewhere into the middle of the alphabet, around L or M, all 25 of those seats were gone.
Wait, let me just stop you there. So you're telling me that if your last name was Miller or O'Malley or Zimmerman, you literally did not even get considered for the highest level math class?
That's it.
Regardless of your grades or test scores.
It didn't matter. The opportunity was gone before they even opened your folder, just because of the first letter of your last name.
That's such a clear example of the consequences of working in the dark. It's not just inefficient. It's baked in inequity. All because they couldn't sort a column called test score.
And this kind of thing wasn't just for student placement. The physical labor just to create the school schedule was monumental.
The gym floor scheduling story. This is probably the best example of the 2 parallel universes she was living in.
It really is. So students pick their elective on paper forms. To build the master schedule for hundreds of kids, the counselors had to somehow make it all fit.
And how did they do it?
They spent weeks over the summer physically rolling out enormous sheets of butcher paper across the gymnasium floor.
Like giant blank spreadsheets.
Exactly. And then they'd take all the paper forms, sort them into these huge piles by hand, and literally move the piles around the gym floor, trying to manually engineer the schedule.
They were a human database.
An incredibly dedicated analog database using physical labor to solve a problem that even in 1985, a cheap piece of software could have done in minutes.
The cost of that technology gap is it's right there, in weeks of human effort on a gym floor.
Which leads right into the whole idea of accountability. Janet talks about these staff meetings. They'd have to set data-driven objectives for the school.
The jargon was starting to creep in.
Well, yeah. But she says they never looked at any data at all.
So what do?
They'd just brainstorm ideas. Someone would shout something out. They'd write it on the board. The goal wasn't to solve a real problem. It was just to file the paperwork, to check the box that said data-driven.
And all the while, let's contrast this with Janet's personal world. While her colleagues are wrestling with paper and the alphabet, what's she doing?
She's living in the future. I mean, by 1985, she'd had a Mac for years. She was using Lotus 1-2-3, then Excel. She was on the internet, using dial-up, Fetch for file transfers, playing online games.
So when she gets her students' test scores, which also came on paper,
she would sit there and manually type every single one into her own spreadsheet.
Why? Why go to all that trouble?
So she could actually use the information. She could instantly sort, rank, identify patterns. In seconds, she could see who needed help, who was excelling, who was misplaced.
He was doing what the entire school administration couldn't, and she brought it to her students, too.
Yeah, she taught her algebra kids how to write spreadsheet formulas in the computer lab. She showed them the patterns behind the math problems. It wasn't magic. It was just applying basic skills that were already out there.
And that's the whole story, isn't it? She had the tools to sort those 25 algebra seats in a blink of an eye.
But the administration had to rely on things like a parent's divorce or the letter M because that was all their system could handle. But again, and this is so important, these weren't people resisting change. They were doing their best with what they had.
It's just a classic, painful example of an institutional knowledge vacuum.
It is, and the shock doesn't stop when she leaves teaching. She goes to grad school thinking, okay, surely at a university where they train researchers, things are more advanced.
She enters a math education doctoral program in the late 1980s.
And what does she find?
Let me guess. More of the same.
Utterly. Shock number one. The only time she touched a computer was in her stats classes, learning complex programs like SAS and SPSS. Her actual education classes, zero technology.
So she walks into a doctoral program in the late 80s and finds an entire academic field acting as if the personal computing revolution just didn't happen.
It didn't exist in their world. And that follows her to her next job in the early 90s in a large school systems research and evaluation department.
The department is specifically responsible for data.
The data department. And the reality was, well, it was the same story, just bigger. The staff didn't use the internet. Most had never even heard of it.
And they were all hired from within the system.
Mostly, yeah. So they had a curriculum expertise, but almost no data or tech skills. Computers were seen as secretarial tools for typing memos, not for actual analysis.
Which brings us to my favorite anecdote, the 3-ring binder doorstops.
This is where the tragedy of it all becomes so tangible. When the standardized test scores came in, they were printed out. Pages and pages of tiny type, one row for each student.
And these printouts were put into 3-ring binders and sent to the principals.
Right. So the data is physically there. The scores exist. But when Janet asked one principal what he did with them, he told her totally honestly that he used the binders as doorstops.
That's doorstops.
Think about that. All the critical information to improve teaching, to help kids, was locked away in pages of tiny print, literally holding a door open.
The data was useless. A principal couldn't ask a simple question like, show me all the students who are below grade level in reading, without days of manual work.
Exactly. The information was effectively quarantined. And this is all happening right when the federal government starts demanding accountability.
The U.S. Department of Education starts requiring data for grants. You have to prove the need, prove the program works.
And the system just couldn't do it. These were common sense requirements, but almost no one could comply because they didn't have staff who could extract and analyze the data. The skills just weren't there.
Which is why when Janet eventually founded EdStar and hired people with actual data skill,
often from outside of education,
they were stunned by the lack of infrastructure.
And on the flip side, the educators were stunned by what EdStar could do. When they generated a basic report, like identifying high-performing kids who weren't in advanced classes, the school staff saw it as some kind of magic.
That's where her nickname came from, right?
Yay.
The head of evaluation started calling her the Janet.
Yeah. If there was an impossible tech problem, the answer was call the Janet. She wasn't an analyst. She was a sorceress to them.
And this gap, this chasm between the two worlds, it just kept going well into the 90s. Her tech friends couldn't understand why she was driving boxes of paper surveys to schools.
They'd ask, why don't you just use email or file transfer?
And the simple, unbelievable answer was that the schools didn't have internet. The district network just wasn't there for them.
So one world is sending data across continents in a second, and the other is still scheduling classes on a gym floor. That invisible gap explains so much.
So what's the big takeaway from all this history of parallel universes? It seems like these major systemic problems, misplacing students, massive inefficiency, they were really just problems of access and basic skills.
Absolutely. The problem wasn't bad intentions or resistance. It was a total lack of institutional skill and infrastructure. Janet's conclusion is that most people in education were working in the dark, not because they wanted to, but because no one had shown them there was a switch.
It's just so alarming. It proves that just having data isn't enough. If you don't have the skills or the framework to use it, that data might as well be a doorstop.
Which leaves a really important question for you, the listener. If this huge invisible divide existed in education 30 years ago with real human costs, where are similar parallel universes operating in vital public sectors right now?
Where does the necessary information exist today, but the people making critical decisions just don't have the framework or maybe the skills to turn on the lights? That's definitely something to think about.